Have you ever known anyone who went on a diet and after they went off the diet, they went right back to where they were before or even ended up with more weight? There's a lot of reasons why. And fundamentally, diets just don't work. And I'd like to walk you through the why. So here are some of the whys diets don't work. First thing is, as you age, your metabolism is going to slow down. Typically, that's going to be about 10% of your metabolism per decade after 40. So at 45 years old, you have to do 10% more exercise and eat 10% less calories in that math to maintain what we would consider as normal health and body weight. If you keep going in that direction, 50, 60, 70, you'd be exercising like a maniac and starving yourself just to maintain your weight. So obviously that's not a rigid rule in the sense of 10% per decade and what you have to do with calories, but it is important to be aware that as you age, what you can expect to get from a diet is going to be slower, and the likelihood of you rebounding backwards if you go back to habits you had a decade ago is going to be a lot higher because your body just can't handle the same kind of noise. Another reason why a lot of people don't get very successful with any kind of typical calorie restriction and higher exercise kind of diet is fundamentally because key elements of your metabolism aren't really supporting your efforts. One of the most common things today would be chronic thyroid problems. It's literally an epidemic, and right now 7 times as many women as men will end up with a chronic autoimmune or inflammatory thyroid disease. And if your thyroid starts to get diminished or attacked or it starts to shut down, it's like the spark plug of your cells. If you suddenly have a lot less spark plugs, you're going to have a lot less metabolic rate, metabolic activity, and what we call caloric burn. So just if you have a low thyroid, you're going to end up with a more sluggish metabolism and you can't burn as many calories in a day. So if you're eating a lot of calories like you did 5 years ago, of course, they're just going to pack onto your waist and hips or wherever. There are other hormonal imbalances with what we call steroid or sex hormones. They're not as well understood as, say, the thyroid part. But there are a lot of people who have disproportionate storage of body fat. Some people, they just hold it all around their waist. Some people all around their hips. Some people hold it all around their hips and they don't have any up around their shoulders and neck. And that's driven by some really, really unique hormonal imbalances. So although you might expect, I'm exercising more and eating less, if your hormones are that particularly specifically out of balance, it's very unlikely you're going to see any, reasonable change with your weight because you haven't really addressed the underlying why, which is a deep, often genetically driven hormonal imbalance. So there's another really kind of strange reason why a lot of people will restrict calories in their lifestyle and diet and not notice any tangible changes in their weight. And this actually has to do with an imbalance of bacteria in your gut. So we have a bacteria in your gut, we're going to call it the F bacteria, and one that's called a B bacteria. If you have a lot more B bacteria than F bacteria, your body will actually have a normal metabolism and you should have no problem if you're staying fit and eating well at losing weight. But people who have more of the F bacteria and less of the B bacteria, they're prone to actually gaining weight and or having a hard time losing weight even if they are almost fasting because the F bacteria have the capacity to turn your food into a higher caloric usable food. Now that's kind of a little bit of a tricky science thing to get into, but it is important to be aware that if you're measuring your meal based on calories when you actually put it on your plate, what happens if you're getting 50% more calories than you actually saw in your package because you got bacteria turning your carbohydrates into fats, and fats have way more calories than carbohydrates, and now you're getting way more calories out of your food. I know it's a bit of a head scratcher, but that's another factor as to why a lot of people who are doing everything that makes sense around fat loss aren't seeing any changes because their bacteria are out of balance. So there's just some really basic ideas as to why just the idea of calorie counting, more exercise out, less calories in, would ever get you any long-term results, because given any of those factors, they won't. And as you age, it's just going to get harder and harder and more frustrating anyway. Now, there's another really interesting thing about the process of actually gaining adipose tissue around your body, or gaining fat. Fat, as we call it, or adipose tissue, is actually a functioning gland, which means it's supposed to be there. It's got a job, just like your pancreas. It's supposed to be there and it's got a job. So when you're looking at the adipose tissue as a gland, as an important structure in your body that actually has a job, your body's going to keep it alive because it's a gland. And the way your body keeps adipose tissue alive is called angiogenesis. It basically means that your body's going to secrete a certain kind of enzyme that makes your blood vessels grow and spread out. Now, this is a bit of a weird math, and I'm not sure if I have this exactly right, but I'm pretty sure it's close. 1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds of adipose tissue has approximately 2,000 kilometers of vascular tissue in it. 2 pounds, 2,000 kilometers of blood vessels. That's a lot of angiogenesis. Angio meaning, blood vessel. Genesis, make some more, make some new. So angiogenesis is your body's ability to make blood vessels. However, when you're going through the process to actually take the burden of that extra-sized gland, the adipose tissue, the fat, and make it shrink a little bit, then one of the most determining factors in the process of fat loss turns out to be how fast your body can reabsorb those blood vessels. And if you're having a hard time doing that, usually because of liver kidney dysfunction, inflammatory status, high insulin levels, stuff like that, you can't lose the fat if you can't reabsorb the blood vessels, which is why a lot of people get down to that last 10, 15 pounds and hit a plateau. It's because fundamentally you can't reabsorb the blood vessels, and your body will not just leave them dangling off in space, so it'll leave them as a deep structure of the actual adipose tissue in your body, and wait until you sped up your liver and kidney metabolism, drop down your insulin and inflammation, so that your body can reabsorb those blood vessels. It's a big plateau. It's hard to say out loud, angiogenesis, but it's one of the biggest factors in why people get plateaus with respect to fat loss, why people get stuck, and why the body is in such a hurry to grow all that adipose tissue back, because it already has all of the infrastructure in place to keep it alive. Seems like a good idea. There's another quality of fat loss. It's a bit mathematical. I'm going to keep the numbers about as average and simple as I can, because it isn't about the accuracy of the math. It's about the fact that our body responds in a really unique way when we're trying to lose weight in a hurry. So when you're trying to lose weight in a hurry, you become catabolic. Basically, you're starving. And depending on how your body's metabolism is going, what you carry around genetically with respect to disease, how chronically inflamed you are, how chronically aggressive your immune system is, the likelihood for you to become catabolic or to burn up your own body tissue in a way that's dangerous is higher, right? So here's the math, and I'm going to, again, keep it pretty loose. So if it takes on average 50 calories per pound per day to keep your muscle protein structure alive, 50 calories per pound per day, and again, that's a loose number, it's more precise than that, and then you take a pound of fat, and it takes only 5 calories a day to keep your fat alive. And again, we're looking at a very specific catabolic environment where a person's got some pretty serious metabolic issues. So this isn't for everybody, but it is an important thing to wrap your mind around with respect to math and the assumptions we have for fat loss. So let's say that you're the accountant and you're living in your belly, and someone comes up with a bill and says, I got 60 pounds of muscle at $50 a pound, so I want $3,000. And your body's like, well, we've only got or calories, we've only got 1,500 calories today, or $1,500 because we're on a diet. And then your body's like, well, what are we going to do when we need 3,000 calories to keep all these pounds of muscle alive? And the body's like, well, I guess we're going to have to eat those muscles to get those calories to keep the body alive, because when a muscle takes 50 calories per pound to stay alive and you're broke, and fat only costs 5, calories per pound, the accountant in you is thinking, man, I can save 10 times as many pounds of this compared to the pounds of this because it's cheaper. So this is where one of the more dangerous terms that we use in medicine around dieting come up, and that's the distinction between weight loss and fat loss. Because weight loss, you could be losing as much or more muscle in the sense of losing pounds compared to how much fat you're burning off. So again, you have to be in a really specific metabolic terrain of inflammation and being kind of tissue catabolic already. But if a person in that situation tried to lose weight in the typical kind of 1980s, I'll eat 1,500 calories a day and burn 3,000 calories a day, that's actually the fastest way to get yourself really, really overweight, because your body doesn't respond to that process the way that we expect. And again, if you're catabolic, you're going to be burning muscle way faster than fat. So there's just one other specific thing with respect to what can go wrong with a fat loss program, or trying to diet in the old way. And that just has to do with the innate deep drive metabolisms that we actually have as a species. Because human beings have the capacity to forage, walk around all day picking up food and, doing other things like that. It's a very high metabolic environment because you're always moving around and you're always getting enough calories to keep moving around. Another thing that humans have the metabolic capacity for is actually what we call fasting or a famine, where, instead of running around trying to find food all day, every day, you're probably going to curl up next to a rock and then push the rock over carefully because you don't want to waste any calories, and probably eat the bug underneath the rock. You're not going to be running around like doing aerobics because you're in a calorie restricted famine-like state. So obviously, in terms of overall health, trying to get more done on less calories is just going to hurt you. And that's sort of the fundamental math of, diets, at least in the last 20 years. Having said that, human beings also have the capacity in terms of metabolic function to do what we would call a feasting, process, especially up here in the north on the planet, where people would be eating a lot more plants in the fall to gain as much weight as they could to get through the starvation part of spring. So it's normal for us to be able to overeat and gain weight. And then usually that's going to be followed by a period of time of undereating and losing weight. And that's usually going to be followed by a period of time like summer and fall, where you're going to be walking around all day, every day, picking up food, and hopefully in fall, gaining some weight back. So those are normal things in your metabolism. But at no point in the evolution of our species have we had any period of time where the math that worked was don't eat any food and burn off as many calories as you can, because that's actually going to damage your metabolism. It's actually called leptin resistance. I'll do another video on that specifically because it's really quite subtle and complicated. But the drum roll of leptin resistance is the ideal thing, and it might take you a year or two, would be to focus on the foraging. Stay physically active, stay mobile, stay fit, and eat transitory amounts of food in a seasonal way, and of course include some fasting every once in a while so that your body goes back to the healthy human ancestral way of maintaining a proper metabolism. So thanks for listening to that. I just wanted to give you a sense of what it is that's interfering with most people's process with respect to a diet, with respect to fat loss. I hope that was helpful for you. There's links below the video that'll give you a link to either the cleansing program that I do, 2 to 4 times a year, depending on interest. There's also going to be a link to my Patreon page because I write books and I develop courses and I put them out there and onto the interwebs, as they say. So if you're interested in learning more, reading more, or studying more, follow the link down to the Patreon page and see if you're interested in any of the courses or books that I have to offer. So again, my name is Dr. Michael Smith. Please like and share the video. If you're a subscriber already, high fives. Welcome to the team. We're just going to keep moving ahead, learning more and more and more about every little thing that's going to help you get well. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. And hope anything that I put out there is actually really, really valuable for you. If there is something specific you want a video made for, send me an email through my website. It's integrativehealthsolutions.ca. You can link to that through the YouTube channel. So again, thanks for watching. Have a great day. And hope this motivates you to, take your health in a very, very practical and tactical way.